Welcome back. My name is Chris, and I'm bringing you the February 2026 edition of NetSuite News. Now, in this version, we're mainly going to be talking about the NetSuite release that's coming out in the next couple months. But before we get into that specifically, there is one additional thing I want to comment on, which is the fact that we are now going into Oracle's fourth quarter, which goes from March, April through May. The reason that's important is because that is the time period that Oracle is trying to get as many sales for their fiscal year as possible. So it is the highest likelihood of getting large discounts on the NetSuite software. So if you are looking at purchasing NetSuite, particular modules, or you know someone who is, take advantage of this time period. You don't want to be buying NetSuite in June or July. You want to buy it during this fourth quarter. Addition to that, if you are going to be purchasing NetSuite and you are looking for an implementation partner, you don't know who to go with, you can reach out to me. I don't mind spending 15-20 minutes to meet with potential clients and point them in the right direction. While I don't do personal consulting anymore, I do know many different consulting agencies, and I like to help my students get the best fit for their implementation partners. So if you'd like that as a service, just reach out to me by email. I also have a contact form on my website. So that's it from a fourth quarter standpoint. Let's now get into the NetSuite release, and actually starting with something that really goes in connection to that. It's something I get asked about quite a bit, which is the release quiz that usually comes in tandem with the release. This year, there is no release quiz, at least as of right now, because, as I've talked about in recent videos, they're still rolling out their kind of revamped certification program, and they have not yet come out with these release quizzes. So if you're looking out for that, don't worry, one does not exist at the moment. When they come out, I will let you guys know through either YouTube videos, LinkedIn, or both. So just keep an ear out for that. Now moving on to the actual substance of the NetSuite release. And first off, if you're not already aware of it, NetSuite releases occur 2 times a year, at the beginning of the year and usually around the fall. And in each release, there's hundreds of different bug fixes, enhancements, and features that are introduced for the system. And it's for everyone. Every client that is on NetSuite all goes on to the new system, the new release. So this one that we're commenting on specifically is 2026.1, and it's going to be rolling out amongst all the clients between February and March. I think it's going to go a little bit into April. So there's many things on this release. I'm not going to talk about everything by a long shot. If you do want to take a look at the release notes, I'll try to include a link for that down below. I really just want to focus on a few different categories of things. We're going to start off by talking about some of the features that I think are quite impactful. They will probably influence a lot of different clients, and for most of them, they've been a long time coming. They're features that we have been hoping for, and we are now getting them. So we'll talk about that first. We'll then, in the middle section, talk about a few different products and modules in NetSuite that have gotten a bunch of different enhancements as part of this release. So instead of going over every specific enhancement, I'll just talk about these modules more in general in terms of where they're coming from, and with all these enhancements, where they now stand. And then lastly, I'm just going to rattle through a few, I wouldn't say they're minor, but they're a little bit more niche features or upgrades that have been added that are going to be useful for somebody. So I'll just kind of rapidly go through them. I have a little list of maybe 5 or 6 features that I thought were interesting. So we'll go through those, and that will basically make up this video. So starting off, let's talk about some of the major features that came out with this release, beginning with the consignment inventory management. If you're not familiar with the concept of consignment, it's the idea that you have, well, let's say we make jackets and we sell them through retail stores. Well, we're not selling our jackets to the retail stores. We're providing them with the jackets. They then sell them and they will reimburse us. There's basically a contract in terms of which the sale price will then come back to us and they'll take a cut of it. So consignment is something that many businesses take part in, not just for retail, but for all kinds of different industries. And in this particular instance, NetSuite has not had a consignment feature at all up until now. Despite the fact that many clients utilize Consignment as part of their business and have been on NetSuite, it just doesn't have a native feature that allows for that. So as a result, a lot of clients have had to do sort of kind of roundabout solutions to account for the fact that they have inventory sitting in other locations. They'll do it through virtual locations. They'll have these $0 sales orders, all kinds of weird things. Now they don't need to go through that at all. They can simply have, it's kind of like a status layer that now gets applied to locations, bins, items, etc., that allow you to designate whether something is for consignment or not. So this is a huge feature for businesses that do have that requirement. Moving on from that, we have the addition of SuiteScript support for the patch method. Now, upfront, I am not a developer, so I'm not going to get into the technicalities of how this works, but the simplicity is there is, when you have the NetSuite system and then certain integrations, like potentially if you're dealing with Salesforce or a Shopify account or HubSpot, oftentimes they will want to utilize what's called a patch method, which is really just a means of communicating between the two systems, especially to update specific fields. So if you want to update fields in your system based on what you're getting from, let's say, HubSpot, the patch method is often used and is a great method. Tons of developers utilize it. And up until now, SuiteScript simply has not allowed you to utilize patch. They've now come out with support for that. So instead of having to go through middleware just to be able to integrate these systems, you can now rely on the patch method. I've talked to a number of different SuiteScript developers, and this is a huge upgrade for the system. And again, it is a long time coming. Most other systems allow for patch. NetSuite has not. So we've been expecting this, but it's great to have it finally here. Moving on from that, we have the addition of price rules. Now, if you watch my videos routinely, you probably have heard me complain many times about NetSuite's limited pricing capabilities, especially for companies that have thousands of items and various pricing scenarios. The fact that it's just really price levels, you've got these customer groups, you're really limited in terms of what you can do. And so what companies do is they basically put in all this information to try to account for all their various price levels. And then when they need to update those, it is a huge pain in the butt. So now NetSuite has come out with price rules, which is actually something that a lot of other, especially larger ERP systems have, like S/4HANA from SAP, Microsoft Dynamics F&O have had this for ages. It gives you the capability to basically designate parameters. So if it's this particular customer or type of customer in this particular time period for these types of products or this specific product, et cetera, you can combine all of these different parameters in various groupings to designate what the price is going to be at the end of the day. So it's a much more comprehensive pricing system. Again, we've all been expecting it for many years at this point, but to see it finally here is excellent. Now, I can't comment on whether they've done it effectively. Usually when NetSuite rolls out a new feature like this, it's got bugs. It doesn't necessarily work exactly the way you would hope for. And then they kind of iron those out over the next few releases. So I will be playing around with this feature, and then I'll probably come out with a video in the next couple months talking about whether I think it is currently workable, what are some of the drawbacks, etc., how to utilize it, etc. So that's going to be coming soon. The last major feature I want to talk about is the addition of the ability to add or edit bulk project tasks using inline editing. So let me just explain what that means. If you are a company that commonly uses projects, especially lots of projects and projects with many tasks, a lot of times what you have to do is you have to import in a ton of tasks. You can only do it once. You can't do another import to update them. So if you make a mistake, if there's something that's wrong or missing, a lot of times you either have to manually go in and change those tasks, or you have to delete everything you just imported and re-import them with the correct information. Again, it can be a bit of a headache. So now what they've allowed you to do is there's a tool that allows you to either add bulk tasks or go in and actually edit them using inline editing. So this tool is going to, for companies that heavily utilize projects, make life a lot easier. So those are the major features that have come out. Now let's talk about some of the products and modules in NetSuite that got a number of different enhancements. So first off, we have NetSuite's WMS, which stands for Warehouse Management System. And I've talked about this. I've even made a full course on NetSuite WMS. It's very limited. It definitely has its rigidity and it's got problems. There are alternatives out in the market that are much, much better, but it is a much cheaper option. And for some companies, it actually fulfills their requirements exactly. And it's a perfectly reasonable solution for their more advanced inventory management requirements. So for WMS, they came out with a number of enhancements such as manually receiving items, landed cost calculations. They have the ability to reverse inbound shipment receipts and a bunch of other things. And frankly, when it comes to WMS overall, if you go back years ago, WMS was completely unusable. But with every single release, they've come out with so many different enhancements and quality of life features. They are making it better and better to the point where it's really becoming competitive for companies that do need a WMS system, but don't necessarily want to move on to an external product. So that's for WMS. Next up, there's the QM module. If you don't know what that is, that's fine. Most people don't, and there's a reason for that. It stands for quality management. It's basically the quality control feature or product module that has existed in NetSuite. It's actually been around for a while. It's just a terrible module, and I can go into great detail on why that is. The simplicity is it just doesn't have a lot of the features that you would want. It's very rigid. It doesn't talk to a lot of the other systems like WMS that you would expect it to, and on and on. So they have come out with a number of different enhancements to it, but at the end of the day, it's still a bad product. It's just not something you'd want to go with. If you need a QC feature, you're going to want to go with something like RF Smart or one of these manufacturing kind of full suites that includes QC functions like Smart Factory, etc. That's QM. Moving on from that, we have FSM, which stands for Field Service Management. That is a product that's utilized by companies that have technicians going out in the field. For example, if you're an HVAC company and you're doing repairs on large, air conditioning units out in the field, FSM is a product, again, we've talked about this ad nauseum in the past. I really do consider that it's a stable product, and for some users, it can be fine. There's been two major limitations with FSM. First off is the fact that to customize it even a little bit, you need a developer who knows FSM specifically. It's a very, I don't want to say fragile, but it requires someone who knows what they're doing to make even the smallest addition of a field. So that's one limitation. The second issue, which really exacerbates the first problem, is the fact there's a limited number of individuals who are familiar with FSM. And again, not just familiar with it, but you have to be a developer who specifically knows how to customize FSM. And there's just so many of them. So when NetSuite a couple years ago re-released FSM as their own product and heavily promoted it and got a lot of clients to try to implement it, there were a number of failures over the last year or two because they all need an implementation, but there's only so many resources that know how to do it. Everyone wants something customized, and so you result with some failed implementations, which is why I've talked about in some other videos alternative products that you can rely on if you don't want to go with FSM. So that's FSM overall, and that's kind of where we're coming from. In this release, they did come out with a number of different, I would say relatively smaller enhancements, fixing some bugs, making some things easier to utilize. Again, I think it is a solid product. You just need to make sure that if you're gonna go with it, you get a company who knows how to do FSM, they can prove to you they've done FSM implementations in the past, and that the technician that's gonna be working on your project specifically knows how to work it, not just some random developer. So just keep that in mind. The fourth and final product that I'm gonna comment on is CPQ, which stands for Configure Price Quote. If you're not familiar with Configure Price Quote, it's not a NetSuite thing. This is a term you'll hear just anywhere in the ERP space. The concept of it is, let's say you sell computers, like desktop computers. The way those get sold, if you've ever bought one, is you don't just buy a computer. You'll buy the basic model, and then you'll pick amongst 4 different types of RAM, 9 different graphics cards, 3 different types of storage space, et cetera, et cetera. It's very modular. And the ability to go, okay, here's the base model, model, and then here are the various features you can add, or like a car, which features do you want to tack onto your car? That is CPQ, giving the consumer the ability to pick and choose what they want and then design the product and price them based on what they configured is the whole point of CPQ. So this is a NetSuite module that's been around for some time, and I've talked about it in videos. This is a product I think is really solid. It's not perfect. It's certainly not flashy. This is generally best for companies that are doing B2B sales. So if you're selling tractor parts, things like that, NetSuite CPQ can be a great option for you. There are so many different ways you can customize it. You can basically do whatever you want as long as you're not trying to make it look beautiful. You can really go customize it to the nines. And unlike something like FSM, it has a very similar customization technique to NetSuite in general, where just a functional person that can go in and has some familiarity with the system can really customize things to their heart's content. So with this release, they've come out with additional enhancements, making some quality of life features, especially on the customization side, and just again, making that product better and better. So if you've ever had a need for a CPQ option, instead of going with an alternative third-party solution, I would definitely recommend checking out NetSuite CPQ. It's a much cheaper option, first off, and it really can get the job done. So that is something you should keep in mind. The last section of this is we're going to be talking about, again, just a number of different features that are a little bit more specific, but I think for some users, they're going to be particularly helpful. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, so I'm going to rattle through a list here, and I'm not going to go into crazy detail. If you have interest in one of these, look it up further in the notes. They give a decent explanation of all these things. So the first one is journal line sublists are now standardized to keys. And without getting into the technical jargon, the basic concept of that is, let's say you have a journal entry and it's got 10 different line items, and you have an integration that you want to have the ability to update something on that journal entry. Well, instead of having to what is called updating the entire sublist, so all 10 lines on that journal entry now all have to be replaced just to fix one thing on that journal entry. Now you have the ability to basically key in specific lines and go, great, I just want to select line 4. That's the one I want to update. And you can have a script or whatever you're setting up to update that specific thing. For developers, this is a huge benefit in particular scenarios. So that is something you can check out. The next one is the ability to change posting periods on pending approval journal entries. So previously, if you had a journal entry that was pending approval, you could not edit and change the posting period. So this could create inaccuracies where, let's say it's currently set for January, but you want to be able to edit it and get it to post in, let's say, February or March, because that's what's called for in that circumstance. You didn't have the ability to do that. It had to be approved first before you could then go in and edit it to change that. So it could cause problems for people in the system. They've now removed that. You have that flexibility. Moving on from that, with NetSuite 360, if you've ever heard that, it's basically a series of different dashboards. They're actually quite helpful and many clients are happy with them. They provide these dashboards with all kinds of portlets and features on a particular area, like Cash 360, Customer 360 dashboards, Item 360s. Two in particular was the Support 360 dashboard and the Financial 360. Those two were unique to the United States. They've now been enabled globally. So if you're in Australia or Europe, you now have access to those particular 360 dashboards. So take note of that. And then lastly, and this one's a little bit more niche, but if you are a company that heavily utilizes a NetSuite for the employee center and payroll, time off requests, etc., they have added a new permission for time off records specifically. So previously it was part of a larger umbrella of permissions for time tracking, things like that. Now, if you want to have, let's say, an HR manager specifically have the ability to edit or maybe create a time off request, you can get a little bit more in the minutia of how you dictate those permissions. So those are just a few of the additional features. There are many other ones, and some of them are going to be really helpful for your particular situation. For example, they came out with a couple specifically in relation to ARM or revenue recognition. That might be critical for your business. Definitely check out the notes. Just scan through some of the headers for them and see if there's anything that's of note for you. But those are the ones that struck my attention, that I've noticed things that clients either have problems with or we've all been waiting for quite some time. The one thing I haven't talked about yet is AI. Now, on these release notes, they actually had a whole section where they said, look, here are all the 19 different things we're coming out with from an AI standpoint. I went through them, and I'm not going to say overall, like in terms of every single one of them, but I found that most of them were super minor changes. For example, the text enhance box, which really just takes text that you've created and makes minor kind of like ChatGPT like modifications to them, or like Grammarly, kind of similar concept, that used to just have an icon on the right to be able to do the text enhance. Now, instead of an icon on the right, they've actually put it as a button at the bottom of the text box. That's an incredibly minor change. I wouldn't even say that's a quality of life improvement. It's barely helpful. And there's a number of things like that where they're simply moving things in different places. They're making minor changes to how you interact with some of the, let's be honest, really limited AI capabilities that currently exist in NetSuite. And as they've kind of promoted with the last suite roll, the whole concept is that the next product that's coming out, which I should stop using the word next for it because it's called NetSuite Next, the upcoming product for NetSuite with NetSuite Next is supposed to have this Ask Oracle feature, which really infuses AI capabilities into the system. Now, I will be coming out with a video probably in the next couple months commenting on NetSuite Next after I've kind of had time to play around with it in the demo account. So I'll talk about that separately, but that's all the next product. In terms of what we have right now, very, very limited AI capabilities, and what they've come out with on this release, in my opinion, there's just nothing to write home about. So you can check it out. If you find something that's helpful for you, great. Let me know down in the comments below. But that wraps up this particular video. If you found it helpful, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And with all of that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.